Hello everyone, Andy here, and here's what you can look forward to in today's episode. In today's episode, in Team Season Preview 5 out of 32, I was joined by Girvane Bila as we preview the Seattle Seahawks 2025 season. Girvane talks about the addition of Sam Darnold.
We can talk about whether he's a top 10 QB or not, but that's just elite play.
Girvane discusses head coach Mike Mcdonald ahead of his second year as the head coach.
I think for me, on a personal level, this is where I'm going to see whether, the coaching is what I'd want it to be or what I think it is, which is good coaching.
And Girvane also predicts his team's end of season record in our win-loss-tie section. Hope you guys enjoy. Hello and welcome back to the Across the Pod NFL podcast for our next team season preview, and this time we are taking on the Seattle Seahawks. I am, as ever, your host, Andy Davis, and with me today I've got a returning guest. He's our usual Seahawks correspondent. Back with us today is a Seahawks fan, Girvane. Girvane, how are you? How are things?
I'm good, Andy. How are you? You know what? I look forward to these every year, and we're back here. We're always around the summertime, but look, we couldn't find a better period to talk about the NFL, if we're going to be honest. So it's a pleasure to be here, and I can't wait to talk about, my favorite team here.
Absolutely, and we do have you on every year for the episode, and we do get you on as well at certain points during the season. So yeah, looking forward to talking all things Seahawks with you again.
I mean, I can't wait to get started. I mean, where would you like to begin?
Well, let's head into the ins and outs of the off-season. So in terms of your ins, these include Sam Darnold, Cooper Kupp, DeMarcus Lawrence, re-signing the likes of Drew Lock, also Marcus Valdes-Scantling's joined the team, River Craycraft, and also others, including Josh Jobe. And then your main outs include Geno Smith, DK Metcalf, Tyler Lockett, as well as Laken Tomlinson, Trey Brown, and Pharaoh Brown, amongst many others who have also come in and out of the team. And in the draft, the Seahawks took Gray Zabel, 18th overall, the offensive lineman, Nick Amanawari, safety, 35th overall, and also Elijah Arroyo, tight end, 50th overall. I probably absolutely butchered that name. Also, many other players were taken as well, including Jalen Milroe, the quarterback, 92nd overall. For you, Girvane, what's your take overall on the Seahawks offseason?
I think it's been one where there's been obviously just major reshifts. I'd say the major reshift is obviously the QB position. That would be like the elephant in the room that I'll have to address here in, with Geno Smith and Darnold obviously coming our way. I think me personally, like we had to get younger and we had to get cheaper. That was always gonna be something that we had to end up doing with Geno, whether we liked it or not. Now, are we going to be better? That is where my main question lies with our quarterback play. I think that's literally going to be the defining factor, whether we're going to be good or average or below average or bad, or pretty much the worst team in the NFC, let alone the NFL, really. So with Darnold, it's going to be very interesting to see in a number 3 overall pick, a former number 3 overall pick. I feel like his career, it's been a weird one because it was obviously began with so much promise, but I think the MO stays the same, where you got to prove. And I feel like he had a great Pro Bowl year in 4,319 yards, 32 touchdowns. We can talk about whether he's a top 10 QB or not, but that's just elite play. Now, is that his level? A lot of people are going to argue no. That was great work from the Vikings OC, and we have obviously Clint Kubiak, our new offensive coordinator, who will probably look to strike the same kind of magic that the Vikings did. But I think all of this is just it's down to Sam, and it's down to him setting the tone. I think very early. I think what's been happening behind the scenes early on, it's been a bit odd to me in the way McDonald kind of had to laughably reassure that he was going to be the starter. I'm not sure how to feel about that, because if you're done with, yes, it is up to you to make things, it is up to you to make things essentially in your favor in terms of, you're going to be the starter here and, remain that way. But that kind of told me that, the outside, well, maybe even not just McDonald, but I don't think it would be McDonald, but I think just maybe there are others in the organization, and I think just again, the public opinion is that he might not work out, and it's just it's down to him, to prove people wrong here.
Absolutely, and I think that is really one thing I wanted to get into was Sam Darnold, because we talked about it a little bit in the last episode, which was the Vikings, about Sam Darnold and his departure from Minnesota, and I feel like he has got a big year to prove, because right now he's had one good season as an NFL quarterback. I mean, the Jets' time was, I wouldn't say it was bad, but it wasn't great. It was just probably just the level just slightly below average, but obviously not good enough to be a franchise quarterback there. And then his time at Carolina was average to bad as well, and then back up at the 49ers. And I remember this time a year ago, we were talking about it with a Vikings fan, John, about, was he going to do much? Probably not. Just going to be a bridge quarterback to JJ McCarthy. And remember, he was meant to only really play probably the first few weeks, and then McCarthy had come in during the season. That was the plan for the Vikings. That was the very clear plan, that he was going to be there just to fill the gap until McCarthy was ready, whenever that was, whether that was 6 weeks, 12 weeks, 2 seasons. And obviously ended up, due to the McCarthy injury, having the whole season, starting. And yeah, it was, for me, what should be a comeback player of the year award. I know Joe Burrow, has more to come back from in terms of has more of a good play on tape beforehand. But I think Sam Darnold, for me, should have won comeback player of the year. But I do worry for him now, because he's going to have the expectation which he didn't have a year ago. No one was really expecting. Even like weeks 12 or 13, people were talking about MVP or maybe even Super Bowl run, but people were still thinking, oh, he'll come back eventually to the old Sam Darnold. And he's going to a team with, on paper, though, definitely more than just on paper, but worse coaching, worse receivers. I mean, you're going from Justin Jefferson to Jackson Smith and Jigba and Cooper Kupp. I mean, that's a bit of a downturn. You think about as well, it's a tight. It's just the offensive line isn't as good as well. It's for me, it's a worry for me, because he spent all the money on him as well, on the guy who's had just one season. We've seen many players in multiple positions have a great year, normally on a contract year, and then a year later, when they get the money, they don't often perform as well. And I do worry that, I'm not saying Darnold will be a player like that, because I think he's always struck me from what I've heard him speak on TV, and when I've heard players talk about him, that he's one of the most liked quarterbacks around the NFL, one of the most respected in terms of, being seen as a good guy. So I don't know whether the money will be impacted in that kind of aspect, but I do worry that it's the expectation from the franchise that they're paying all the money. They're expecting him to play the same as he was in Minnesota. And I just feel like he's going to a worse situation in all different aspects. So for me, I think defense is the one where maybe you could argue it's just as good, just in terms of bailing him out if he has a bad game. But certainly the offense isn't as good. I don't think it hasn't got many good receivers to throw to. So yeah, for me, that is a big worry when it comes to Sam Darnold.
Definitely a big why. This is what many people will say is a risk here. You're hoping that the player that you're hoping that you're paying for the player that you saw last season, and not the player that you've seen for, again, the majority or 80% of his career. I do think strategy-wise, in terms of, I think the Seahawks need to understand that if he's not going to be that level that he was last year, you need to make it probably as easy for him as possible. We have a good running duo in Walker the third and Charbonnet. I would suggest that you use them as much as possible if you can to just alleviate stress or the pressure that Darnold will inevitably face in any Seahawks game that he plays, especially the ones at home, where bad quarterback play at home, it could get very bad for him. Even away at tough stadiums, it could get really tough for him. So I think yes, I'm not too keen on our offense, especially our offensive line, and how it looks. There's a player in Smith and Jigba that I want to talk about personally later on. But if there's any way we can be successful with Darnold, should he not provide the same elite play, or it should take a bit of a step below, it would be for our running back duo.
Yeah, I mean that's something else in itself, the run game, and yeah, it's. I mean, the only thing he's got probably in his favour is that he's going to probably a weaker division. You think about having to last season play against the Lions twice, also play against the Packers and Bears twice. I mean, the Bears weren't great, but you think about what he's going through now with NFC West. I mean, he's got the Rams, who probably are the favourites to win that division, but the Niners' schedule is pretty favourable. And I think if they get McCaffrey back fully healthy, I think they're going to be a team that also, is thereabouts and doing well. And then the Cardinals, are the worst team on paper in that division. And I think that, they could be like the Bears, like a 7-win team, or you could beat easily on your day. So I think he probably is going to, the Rams, they're the one team you think, but apart from that, so I think that could help him in a way. He's got some games in this season. I'm looking at the schedule now against some teams that could be really bad. I mean, we'll go into your schedule later on, but there's games against the Saints, the Titans, the Falcons, the Colts, the Panthers. So there's definitely games he can win. And the Niners, he's playing twice, and we don't know how they're going to turn out. And then the Jags, again, I can't quite tell. We don't know what's going to happen with Liam Cohen, whether he's going to be good or bad. And you think about the Commanders. They're probably going to be one of the hardest teams they face. But you never know. These big teams, if you have one or two injuries, especially the quarterback position, then that open up that as well. So the schedule's not too bad for you guys. I think that I've seen worse schedules for teams this season than the Seahawks one. So yeah, I think that's going to ultimately be a big sticking point. And I think as well, this is a segue into my second question to you, Girvane, is about coaching. Mike Mcdonald, it was his first season as the Seahawks head coach after a long time as a coordinator. What's your views on him going into it? Because you had the 3-0 start, obviously performances sort of slipped away, but I think you could have easily had a lot worse of a first year than Mcdonald did.
We definitely could have. I looked at the other, let's say, rookie head coaches that were in the NFL around that time. They were all, they were all much worse. No, but that's not a slight at the coaches, in my opinion. Different franchises have different situations, different rosters. It's those are factors to consider. I think McDonald did a great job. For me personally, with my team, I always look at what can you do with the defense. Can you strengthen it? That was actually my concern, actually going into the season. I don't know if I talked about it on last year's preview. This is something this is something I'll look into a lot further as this season goes on. But I was a massive fan of how he strengthened our if not just reassuring that the defense is going to be at that top 10 level for me, which I think it is. I think the primary objective for 2025 is to turn pressures into sacks more. On the other hand, the offense the offense proves to be a problem, like you mentioned, and you saw that probably as the season progressed. We started well, and I think that was because we were executing a lot better. But then we fell into the trap or the tendency of execution failures. An offensive line that was already, you could argue, poorly organized. It showed as the season got on, lack of balance on offense. I think he'll need a greater role in improving that. Obviously, again, we've got new stuff coming in and new OC coming in. So I like the intent of us bringing one in Kubiak. Yes, he kind of had a similar thing as well. When New Orleans offensively, they looked very creative, and then it dwindled as the season went on. But I like the intent that we are showing to actually address the offensive issue. Whether that works or not, who's to say? But I think the two major things I'm going to look at is, can we get more sacks on the defensive end, and can we look more creative on the offensive end? But other than that, I feel like he had a good, if not great, 2024. Used it as a great springboard into, I would say, like a slightly improved 2025 for me.
Yeah, I mean, we'll go into your schedule prediction later, but where are you seeing like a successful season? I mean, I don't believe you're a type of fan who's believing your team's going to go and win the whole thing. I mean, I could be wrong. You might think they're due for a Super Bowl run, but I think there's definitely, it feels like a realistic expectation that, unless you hit real lightning in a bottle with Sam Darnold or other players around him, you're probably not going to make the Super Bowl. And there was no sort of playoff appearance last year. Is that the aim? Is that the kind of hope for the Seahawks? Is just to at least be in the conversation to get in the playoffs, or what are you sort of viewing for this season for your team?
I think the viewing has to be competitive to get into the playoffs. I think with the way how the NFL is, a lot like the NBA or just American sports in general right now, it's very volatile. You can be very great. You can be very great one year, and then for some reason, a lot of stuff changes the following year. And the NFL is the NFL is, of course, a victim to that too. Like we saw that. Like I can't believe, I'm going to mention them. I can't believe a team like the Niners went from how great we know they can be to all of a sudden having a year that's not quite the standard. It's odd to me, but that's just how the NFL works. Now, I think for me, more than anything, I just want to see whether my objectives are achieved, which are the ones that I just pointed out a minute ago, which are, again, for the defensive end, I'd want them to improve and become a lot more ruthless in terms of the pressures and the sacks thing. And again, the offense being a lot more creative. If I'm seeing the same kind of, offensive plays or execution failures that I saw last year, then all it's going to tell me is, if we finish, let's see, a season with, let's say we have this, okay, I don't want to mention the prediction. I don't want to mention my prediction off the cuff now, but if we do very well and we get to the playoffs, convincingly so, but I still see kind of the same kind of issues, then to me, all it will tell me is, yes, we've been successful, but the inherent issues are still not as addressed as such. And I think for me, more than anything, I would just like the more inherent issues, especially on offense. Defense, I'm not really as concerned. Like I mentioned before, I only see one objective there. The offense is so much. So for me, if we can be competitive in the playoffs because of the fact that we were very creative on the offensive side, whether we get them or not, it won't matter to me as much, just because we're not built for, a championship run right now. But again, if we can get to that competitive spot because of our creative offense, then I think that's, I'm more than happy at a season like that.
I kind of feel like that sort of window you're probably in, and like a lot of teams are in that sort of equator line, as to you're not going to be, when you're not good enough to win Super Bowls, and you're not bad enough to win to get high draft picks. It's kind of, it's a weird one to have sort of as a fan. I find that a weird. It's always like a hard one to sort of know how to sort of behave and react as a fan, because on the one hand, if you're around the sort of the playoff picture, and even if you make it in as like a wildcard team, Steelers fans will probably know this best out of anyone. Is that you always think in the back of your mind, well, we're going to be knocked out in a week's time. So, and then on the when you think about if you're going for Super Bowls and it's great, you've got the hope of, you want to go far in the playoffs, and if you're bad, at least you've got that consolation of, well, we're going to get this top prospect quarterback, or we're going to get this top quarterback, top prospect receiver or running back. I find if you're in that sort of middle line of of that sort of not being good enough to win, not being bad enough to sort of get the high draft pick, and you are sort of looking for a quarterback, or maybe your quarterback's just okay. It is that fine balance. I think the Steelers are definitely fall into that category, and I think the Seahawks definitely are a team that could also fall into that. They've got some good players, they've got good coaching, but they're lacking that sort of real, I think, game changer on both sides of the ball. I mean, I kind of think, I could be wrong. I don't think there are many stars in Seattle. I don't think it's we haven't got like a Cooper Kupp 3 years ago, even 2 years ago, would have been that star. And Sam Darnold, if he played like he did in USC or played like he did in Minnesota every year, then you could say, yeah, he's a star. I mean, Devin Witherspoon is probably the one you would say probably is the best player on the team. But it is. Yeah, I don't know what you think, Girvane, but I think a bit like us as well. We're in that same bracket. The Steelers are in this bracket, despite going all in this year. Yeah, it's that weird sort of line between being good enough to get reaching a high level, right, high stages of the playoffs, or being bad enough to get a high draft pick.
I think for me, these type of situations. I find them weird too. I'm not going to lie and be like, these types of periods with teams I enjoy. No, like with the NBA has this again. The NBA has the same thing. Even football has the same thing, where there's like teams where, well, I say football, soccer for the Americans that are listening to this, but there's always going to be teams like that. Unfortunately, my team fits into this, but I think for me, on a personal level, this is where I'm going to see whether the coaching is what I'd want it to be, or what I think it is, which is good coaching, because it will decide for me if should we fall out of that equator and become, let's say, a below average and not really bad team. I can rely on my coaching to kind of get me back up there, back to the equator even more further up to. And with the Seahawks, I feel like, yes, there's a lot of there's a lot, the superstar conversation. I find it also an interesting one, because it will be Witherspoon. He'll probably be. I see him as probably the only true superstar there. And the way how the NFL works is it's still a star-based league. If you have that star that is able to max his value, it will lift the team a lot. And we had that in years prior with Russell Wilson, even after the Legion of Boom, as they started to go, and whether it be retire or move to other teams, we had that one superstar, and it happened to be at the most important position. And I was so used to seeing that in, like, he's no longer there. And like, this is what happens when I feel like you don't have that superstar, is like the fall into the equator. You see it's more evident, more apparent. And that's something that every NFL team suffers. So in terms of the superstar conversation, and in terms of like, whether me to be optimistic or pessimistic about our team's standing based on the current roster that we have, I'm in the middle. I'm in the middle. Would another superstar make me feel better about our current situation? Of course. It's hard to say. It's hard to say whether we are probably you know what, I'll put it like this. I think Weatherspoon is a superstar. And that's a player I've really grown to like. Now, you could argue the QB we have is probably the superstar we're banking on. Now, does he become that superstar? Is this going to be the Sam Darnold? Is this going to be the Sam Darnold that finally finds a stable home? And should he find that stable home, we have our second superstar. But I think this is why the season's so important. It will decide whether, the superstar we're banking on, this is someone we can back and invest in long term, or we are probably going to look to, the franchise are probably going to have to make one or two maneuvers here. I'm not expecting them to move Darnold on straight away. It'll be very difficult to do that, but that will be that's the player that they're looking at thinking, we see a superstar. Now, can we bring that out of you with the money that we're paying you? We'll find out.
Absolutely. We'll find out in this season and what their overall record will be. And this is a good segue into our final section, which is going to be our win-loss tie section. Now, we mentioned it before at the start of the episode. Girvane came on last year and the many years before that. So the Seahawks went 10-7 in 2024. Now, Girvane, do you by chance remember what your record prediction was 12 months ago?
I don't actually know.
So you actually predicted 10-7. So you got it correct. And I'm looking here. I'm looking at here as well, like the kind of I got every sort of week by week, and I've got what you predicted. And the first 2 weeks you had it bang on. You beating the Broncos, you had the Seahawks beating the Patriots. You had yourselves losing to us and the Dolphins from week 3. Now, I do think maybe if we had everyone healthy, could have been at least more of a closer contest. But that was genuinely my 14 years as a fan. That's probably one of the most underwhelming, disappointing performances I've seen in my time being a fan. That was an awful game to watch. We weren't even competitive in that game. So you correctly predicted week 4 that you lose to the Lions. You had yourself beating the Giants in week 5, which I'm sure everyone probably thought of. You did lose that game, 29-20. You had yourselves losing to the Niners, which happened. You had yourselves losing to the Falcons, which you actually won that game. Then you had you beating the Bills, but you did lose that game, and lost to the Rams, which you predicted as well. And then week 11, you say you lose to the Niners, but you ended up winning that game. Then you beat the Seahawks beating the Cardinals, which did happen. Then the New York Jets game, you had yourselves losing that game, and you actually won it. And then you had the Seahawks beating the Cardinals again, and you did beat the Cardinals again. And then you had the Packers, Vikings, Bears, Rams, and you went for win, 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 and it was loss, loss, win, win. So yeah, it was weirdly quite a mixed match of results. Quite a lot of 2 or 3 wins and 2 or 3 losses, and fair. A lot of your results were actually wrong, but ended up being the correct prediction. So it is funny how that works out. So before we go on to the record prediction as well, I want to get through the last question that got asked in the last show. Now, we did have a guest planned from a different team episode from America, which would have been perfect for this question to answer it. But in the end, it wasn't. He's coming on hopefully next week. In 2 weeks' time when this episode is recorded. We are filming this on July 13th, and this podcast will come out towards the end of July. So if you as well if there has been some sort of trade involving Seahawks players that we've missed, that is why. But anyway, our last episode was the Minnesota Vikings, and John McDonald was our guest, and he asked our next guest, which is you, Girvane. The NFL is coming to Melbourne next year in an ever-expanding NFL league where we're having games this year in Madrid for the first time, Berlin. He has asked us to ask you, which city would you like to see the NFL play a game next?
Oh, great question. Wow. You know what? And the NFL, in terms of how they've been expanding their league globally, I just have to commend that. I just have to commend the NFL for that. Firstly, because I've got family who are now taking an interest into the sport, and it weren't through me. Like I've got cousins that are playing flag football now, and like it's crazy how big the game's actually grown. But to answer the question, this is a weird one. Okay, so the country that I have in mind, I don't know if they've done it there, or I don't know if they've done it there, or if they've done it there recently. But I'd like. Oh, okay. Me personally, I'd like them. I'd like them to do. I'd like them to do Holland.
Oh, which part of the Netherlands?
I think if we're good, the obvious one will have to go with. Well, you know what? No, because I was going to say, because there's two places I have in mind.
Okay,
but I think we'll go. But I think we'll go with the obvious one. I think Amsterdam is the one. I think I'd love the NFL to try and see if they can get a game there.
You know what? I hate to burst your bubble. I would absolutely hate that. I would not like at all there to be a game in Amsterdam NFL game because this is too many stoners. And that's not me. That's not my lifestyle. And there are some beautiful parts of Amsterdam, but when I went there once, and not that I ever smoked any weed, just to put it out there to the listeners, I did not smoke any weed. But I know people that did, and that's all they wanted to do essentially. So yeah. I think, for me personally, my answer is always going to be Cardiff. I mean, I can see it.
Oh, that's a great. Oh my god!
Literally,
the UK countries are actually really good guesses.
I mean, Edinburgh's a city would be great. So I think Cardiff, Edinburgh are very similar when it comes to kind of cities they are. But literally, I can see the stadium from my balcony window, and whenever I go to these events, whether it's this event involving flag football or whether it's NFL games, when I've been to the Super Bowl in London and, it was meant to be Munich last year, it does take a lot of time to get there. I have to, get myself to the airport and then I have to get myself on the National Express, get down to London. That's 3 hours out of my day at least, another half an hour to get to the bus station, involved to flight if you want to go to any of the European games or Dublin game this year. But literally, if I can get a bus which takes me 15 minutes to get from my flat to the stadium, then for me, it's perfect. But not just that, I think since I've been a Welshman and having that sort of, I know friends of the show, Michael McQuaid and the Irish NFL show guys like Shane Brennan, the pride they have themselves in, the pride they're having in having a game come into their own country, come into Ireland. It's fantastic, and you can really see how happy it's making them. Particularly Michael, who's done a lot of work towards promoting the game in Ireland. Shane's also done a lot of work as well. He's been also great in promoting Irish NFL as a place to host it. And I think for me, if I can be there in Cardiff, just seeing just NFL fans everywhere by the Millennium Stadium, or Principality as it's called now, that would be amazing for me. I do actually think I think the next game we're going to see is Middle East. I think that is going to happen. I'm surprised it hasn't yet, to be honest.
You think?
Yeah, I think there was talk about it. I think UAE's got a marketing right now in the NFL. I want to say is it the Niners? I think it's definitely an NFC West team have got. I want to say, or maybe it's the Chargers. I think it's the Niners have got marketing rights now in the UAE, and I think with how it's gone in sport in general, with how much the boxing's gone down that route of fights being done there. Obviously, you have the World Cup in Qatar in 2018, no 2022 even. We got the Saudi Arabia World Cup in 2034. I just feel like golf as well, live golf. I just feel like Saudi Arabia are putting their hands in a lot of pies when it comes to getting involved in sports. So I think that I think that is where they'll go next, personally.
You know what? That obviously that's the obvious one, like probably the elephant in the room, as all, but most if not all sports are taking that route, I suppose. I actually like the Cardiff shout. The Cardiff shout. I actually forgot with the likes of could you imagine like an NFL game at like the NFL game at a Millennium Stadium would be class. The NFL game at Hampden Park would be wicked. Celtic Park. I reckon, like if the NFL wanted to go down that route, there's a lot of great stories that they'll find there too. There's a lot of great people that they'll find there that love the NFL that they don't even know. I think you can make that I think that would be that would be a great romantic fit.
I think as well I know he might not be in the league in a couple of years, but Louis Rees-Zammit would be, get the Jags there, have them playing 2 games in the UK, 1 week there at Wembley, next week put him in London, so I put him in Cardiff. You'd have that element. You'd have also Tyson Bagnet, who was the Bears' backup quarterback last season. He's even got a tattoo of the word Taily, which is Welsh for family. I think, you've got some storylines there, and I think there's a lot of Welsh, fandom. I do believe there is probably more NFL fans in Ireland, Scotland, and England. From personally my experience of going to NFL games in London, you see a lot more Scots and Irish people than English people than I hear Welsh accents. But I know friends of the show, Shane Harris, who's coming on to the Baltimore Ravens season preview in a few weeks' time. He's also, like myself, very much in on this idea. There's a few of the guys, Canan, who's done a lot of great work graphic design wise in the NFL, sort of on Instagram, and he's been to. I met him at a college game in Dublin, and I know he'd love it as well. And there's plenty of NFL fans. I mean, there's NFL teams. I did some British and American football teams. There's I went to watch South Wales Warriors recently. Went to their practice session as well. Got to do some media there. So there's definitely a hunger for NFL in Wales, and I know there's an elephant in the room in the sense that people have asked this before, and people have pointed out that logistically it's not possible in terms of how the stadium's built. But I'm sure they can make way. I'm sure they can find a way to, there's when you see the Wembley game, they block out some of the lower seats because of the view being blocked. So yeah, I do feel like they can find a way. I mean, if they can have Monster Truck and Speedway in Cardiff, they can have an NFL game, I'm sure. So yeah, definitely would be all in on that if that became a thing. But now we go on to what your question is to our next guest.
Okay, I like the question that I actually got, so I might have to go. I'm actually going to go down that. I'm going to go down that route. My question to the next guest is, if you had to pick, an NFL game, to sum up your life, what would it be?
Wow, that is actually an amazing question to ask. If you had to pick an NFL game to sum up your life, wow. Whew, I can't think what that would be for me, and I'd have to try and let you know by WhatsApp. I can't think what the hell that would be right now, and without my calendar to hand, I think I know who the next guest is, but I haven't got my calendar to hand to see who we're doing next. So I'm intrigued to see whoever it is, how they answer that question. Let's go into it. Let's get into our win-loss tie section, which is, if you aren't familiar by now, those listening or watching, each guest, we go through each game and they answer each game with a win-loss tie. So week 1 is a NFC West matchup straight off the bat. It's a home game against the San Francisco 49ers. Girvane, win, lost, or tie?
I have to pick a win here just because, you know what? I've never thought of week 1 must-win games, but this one's huge. Just because if we were to lose this game, I can very much see a losing streak very early.
That's interesting because I think the early part's probably your most favourable part of the schedule. You got a week 2 game on the road to the Steelers.
This one I see as a loss, just because I can just see a revenge game by a player that we just gave them. So
yeah, that's going to be an amazing thought. It's a shame it's not in Seattle, but that's still an amazing prospect. Week 3 though is a home game against the New Orleans Saints.
I think this one is going to be a routine win. I'm not too high on the Saints, really. I don't think anyone is. So I think that's going to be a win. I'll even go with I'll even go with a scoreline of 34-17 on this one.
Wow. So week 4 is a road game, and it is on the road to the Arizona Cardinals.
This one's weird because whenever Arizona's like, we've had moments with this team, whether it be Lynch going crazy, or that weird game where it was a tie, which I believe was a first night game. Also, we've always had weird things when playing Arizona. I think I'll go with a win here. I'll go with a 26-14 win.
So then week 5 is a home game against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers.
I see this as a loss because I'm very high on Tampa this outcoming season. I actually think this is going to be one of the strong contenders in the NFC, should Baker and Mike Evans be at their rich vein of form.
Okay, so then week 6 is a game on the road to the Jacksonville Jaguars.
This one I'll go for a win. I've got a particular score line. So how I've done this is there are certain games that I have specific scores for, just because if I see a win or a loss very convincingly so, or something that's, I would say, defining, or a game that I'm really keen on watching, I'll give it a scoreline. So for Jacksonville, I've gone with a win. I've gone with a 28-20 win, and I do feel like this is going to be a game where, obviously, us Steelers fans are going to see Travis for the first time, and I think he could potentially have one of those games here where it performs well, but the team still lose.
Fair play. Yeah, it's a hard one to know because what Liam Cohen did for Baker Mayfield was incredible, but we've seen many coordinators do this with players, and then they get to be a head coach and work out. So I think the fact they went aggressive and got Travis Hunter was a sign that they're trying to, make some moves. But yeah, it's hard to know. That division is always weird. But week 7 is another AFC South battle, and it is against the Houston Texans at home.
I think I see this as a loss, just because of it being our first Monday Night Football game, and I just think when you look at the two QBs, I could just imagine just the better one, or the better one that people are obviously going to say in terms of public opinion. I could just see CJ just going crazy, and I had this as a 31-23 loss.
Okay, so then week 8 is a bye week. So then week 9 is a road game against the Washington Commanders.
So if you thought that we'd lose our first Sunday Night Football game, you'd also be correct. I'm a big fan of Washington, and I think this could get ugly with how good Jaden Daniels is. So I went with a loss of 37-21.
Don't blame you at all. Week 10 is you're back at home for the first time since week 7, and you're taking on the Arizona Cardinals.
I would have us winning that also with a score of 24-13.
So then week 11 is your first of 2 back-to-back road games, and you're at home to the Los Angeles Rams.
I think this will be a loss. I mean, it's obviously obviously it's a game against a rival of ours, and but I just think again, this one's probably like we'll have to take this loss because I know we'll play them again. So I've gone with a 27-17 loss here.
Fair play. Well, you're going from in week 11, the 2009 first overall pick, to in week 12, you're facing a road game against the 2025 first overall pick in Cam Ward and the Tennessee Titans.
Do you know how mad that is? That the two picks of from those 2 years, like that's I can't believe that's actually happened. I can't believe that the 2000 number one overall pick is still playing.
I mean, I don't know how much more we've got left. Do you think he has maybe 1 year left, 2 years left?
I think a lot of it will depend on how their season actually goes.
Yeah, I do feel like if they were to win it, I think he would definitely retire. I think Drew Brees would have been the same thing maybe a year earlier, and I do feel like Travis Kelce as well will be the same thing. I think personally, I did think this last year when they were going for the three-peat. I said to myself, I said to people as well, I was with that, if he wins this game and he wins the Super Bowl, he's retiring. I think that for me was how his life's going now, doing some acting. Happy Gilmore, I think will be out by now. Happy Gilmore 2, which he's in, if not maybe a day or two after his released. But either way, yeah, he's gone into that realm now. And I just feel like he is getting worse as a player, and yeah, I think that I think certainly with Matt Stafford as well. I think personally they are a team to watch out for in terms of winning that NFC. I think if they work out and win it in San Fran, I do feel like that's almost like I think everyone wants the Peyton Manning ending to their career, winning on your final game. So I think that would be personally I see that happening without a doubt, and maybe even Cooper Kupp. Maybe Cooper Kupp will also retire as well. So if you guys want it, for example, but no, certainly if Matt Stafford won it, I think he retires without doubt.
Agreed. But yeah, no, I mean, it's crazy that we're playing the 2009 number one, and then the next game is literally the number one of this upcoming season. With that being said, I think I'm going to go with a win, 31-24 win at Tennessee.
So in week 12, you're taking on a team we spoke to last time, the Minnesota Vikings, and it is the Sam Darnold Bowl as you host the Vikings.
We have to win this for him. So this one's probably the only emotional. Probably in the last 3 years we've done, I don't think I've made an emotional decision. Maybe I probably have. I probably have. I mean, I made one week 1 technically, if we're going to do that. So I'm going with a 28-20 win.
Fair. Well, your next game starts a 3-game stretch where you play teams who are playing internationally this season, and the first 2 are playing each other. You've got a road game against the Falcons before a home game against the Colts, and then a home game against the Rams. So first of all, the Falcons in week 14 on the road, win, loss, or tie.
I think I'll go with a loss here. I think this is where you start seeing, would you call it, like the same kind of period that we had last season, where it's like, where it was like, 2 wins and then you'll lose 1. 2 wins here, you'll lose 1 here. Obviously, there's not that many games from that point. There's only 4. I know week 17 and week 18 it's to be decided. But I see this as a loss. I see this as a 26-14.
Then week 15 against Colts, win, loss, or tie.
I'm gonna go with a win here, 24-12 win.
And then week 16, you're taking on the Rams at home, win, loss, or tie.
This one's difficult, and I'm going to. I had this initially as the result I wanted it to be against the result that it may realistically be. And it actually goes into the conversation that we just had 2 minutes ago. I see this as a loss, but the loss is narrow because if because I think by this point we'll know what Stafford is going to do with his career, and should he take the decision to retire or not, I think he'll want to deliver in the final few weeks of the season, and I think it could be one of those games where Stafford has, a stretch towards the end of the game where he literally takes us back in time to what he was doing with the Lions, and it's going to annoy me because it's happening to my team now. Well, to be fair, he was doing that at the Lions before, so it doesn't really make that much of a difference, really. But I think it's going to be a narrow. So I've gone with a loss of 27-24.
Well, that was actually as well your final home game of the regular season. So you got 2 games left. They're both on the road, and the first one in Week 17 is against the Carolina Panthers at the Bank of America Stadium. Win, loss, or tie?
I've gone over a win here. I've gone over 20-14 win. I'm not sure. You know what? I'm gonna look a lot into Carolina this year, just simply for Bryce Young. I feel like Carolina. There's a conversation that needs to be had with them, but I'm not sure what conversation it is. I think it will be something that I'll need to actually look into once the season actually starts, about kind of where their trajectory is. Because I like Carolina as a franchise, just because of the players that they've probably had over the years. I find them really polarizing to look at. So yeah, but I've gone with a win here.
And then finally, it's amazing you're playing in Week 1 and Week 18, the 49ers. But you got them this time at Levi Stadium, the home of Super Bowl 60. Win, loss, or tie?
I think this is where they get their revenge. So because we beat them in Week 1, according to my prediction, I think this is where the revenge is. I think crowd is going to be fever pitch on their side of the view. I think, again, remember how I mentioned that you'll have a game where it can get ugly for Darnold. I think this is the game where it could potentially get ugly for him. And that's even if he play and I'm not saying that he plays bad. I'm just saying it's the atmosphere and last game that's difficult for anybody, let alone a divisional rival that were playing in the last game. Like I think they're gonna go nuts. So I'm going with a 38-14 loss here.
Fair. So that means, with your record prediction, you end up with a 9-8 record.
This now speaks into what we talked about very early on in terms of the equator. Now, a lot of people I've seen over and unders of 8.5. I took the over just because one thing with the Seahawks is we're gonna have. I'm gonna watch a game where we have. It was either we win a game that we have no business of winning, or we have a game that we have no business of losing. Originally, I didn't want to do 10-6. I didn't want to do the same prediction that I had last year, but I do think the overall tone of the team, of the podcast that we're doing, the episode that we're doing, it's one where we're in the middle, but I can realistically see the offense to be a problem again, which is why I'm taking our win away and us being a 9-win team this year.
Do you think that makes the playoffs? Do you think that would get you into the playoffs?
That's difficult. It depends on what your opinion on the it depends on what one's opinion on the NFC is going into the season, or just as the season goes on. Do you look at the NFC? You look at the NFC as a a stronger conference, a stronger conference than it was the year before. I personally, the NFC is a very confusing one in terms of the teams, because I always feel like there's you've got the winners in the Eagles. Now, other than them, there's always going to be a team that again just has like a rapid ascension. And we had obviously the Lions in recent years. There's always like a team that I would look at. There's always a dark horse that comes. There's the likelihood of a dark horse is a lot more higher than the AFC. So I think a lot of I think us making the playoffs, I'm personally going to go with no, because I think what I'm going to see with the NFC now is we may actually see teams. We've got a lot of these rising teams now, and I think we're going to suffer because of that.
Yeah, I can definitely see that happening. But that is where we will end this podcast episode for today. So once again, Girvane, thank you for coming on.
It's always a pleasure, Andy. I'm sure we'll talk about the NFL a lot during the season, as always. One thing I'll say is huge credit to Andy, really, on terms of having a great season last year. Pretty much toured every part of the globe that he tried to. The NFL season. I was super jealous that he was at the Super Bowl. But then again, I was on holiday at that point. So it wasn't like I didn't go anywhere that I didn't enjoy, but I would have much rather preferred being at the location where the Super Bowl was to where I spent my 25th birthday. So
I forget where you went. You did tell me on WhatsApp. Where did you go again for your birthday?
I went to Morocco for my birthday.
Nice. So were you there during the Super Bowl?
Yes.
So did you watch it live? Did you watch it in
I did.
Was it in a bar? Or was it in where you were staying?
Yeah.
In where you were staying?
Yeah.
What kind of? I'm terrible with time difference. What time in the morning or afternoon was that game being played in Morocco?
It would have been it would have been late. I'm pretty sure. It would have been late. I'm pretty sure. I can't remember what time. You know what? I have to find this on WhatsApp because I believe I have a video from that, and it was pretty much dark outside. Now I can't remember what time exactly it was, but it was late.
I'm looking here. It says Morocco is 1 hour ahead of GMT. Now, so it must be, it must be like an hour later.
Yeah.
I always once that line on the map, I forget how close it is actually. Portugal's the exact same time as us. When I went there to Lisbon, I couldn't believe that there was no time difference. Morocco, I suppose, is pretty close to Portugal. So, that's awesome. And that must have been quite a cool experience. I've never watched it really anywhere, but literally this year was the first time I watched it not in the UK, and it was quite nice not having to watch it at 2 a.m. It was quite nice, at 5 p.m. That was awesome. So I kind of have to plan once in my life. If I don't ever get, if I was to one year not get the media credits for Super Bowl, then to watch it in Australia, because I've got a friend that's moved there now as well. They watch it at 10 a.m. on a Monday morning. For me, that's like the ideal time to watch any sport, let alone the NFL. So that's definitely on the bucket list in the future. But there we are. So this has been the Across the Pod NFL podcast. I have been, as ever, your host, Andy Davis, with my guest today, Girvane Bila, and we will see you guys for our next team season preview. See you then.
See ya.